I'm, say, trying to support better mental health in the community, and I was trying to think, what can I practically do to support that? I had quite a good sort of slogan, which was that I think if we want to make research software more sustainable, we have to help sustaining the people writing the software as well, which was all well and good, but then that raises the question of, what can we actually do?
That's Mike Simpson, one of the 3 fellows of the Software Sustainability Institute I talked to for this episode, the others being Esther Plomp and Niko Sirmpilatze. Esther, Mike and Niko started their fellowship this year, 2025, and in the next few minutes you'll hear what motivated them to apply for the fellowship, how they went about it, and what it is they want to do with it. To many of you, the Software Sustainability Institute, or SSI for short, needs little introduction. After all, it's been around since 2010 and has been running the so-called Collaborations Workshop, which is an annual institution here in the UK, with sometimes far-reaching outcomes. For instance, it was the Collaborations Workshop in 2012 that gave birth to the term research software engineering, and led to a movement to promote software engineering in science and to the Society of Research Software Engineering in the UK, not to mention the formation of several RSE groups with jobs and roles in universities and research centres. The central theme of the SSI is that better software leads to better research. And in order to make this happen, the SSI created the fellowship program with the aim, and I'm quoting from their website, to improve and promote good computational practices across all research disciplines and support those who are doing this important work. The first group of SSI Fellows started their work in 2012, and since then, the SSI has been running application rounds every year. Well, nearly, because there was a bit of a pause in 2024 last year. But it's back again, and for this year, 2025, we have a bunch of keen researchers, data scientists, software engineers, and others who all, with their different fields and backgrounds, want to foster better practices in research and research software. Take, for instance, Mike Simpson, who you've just heard at the beginning. Mike is working as an RSE at the University of Newcastle, but Mike has many hats, like that of a trustee of the Society for Research Software Engineering in the UK, as you will hear now. The first thing that came to my mind when I heard Mike Simpson being a fellow is that you haven't been a fellow already, because, you're obviously the trustee at the RSE Society of Research Software Engineering. That's the official title. So you're a trustee or you're the president?
Trustee and vice president.
Well, there you go. But you're a SSI fellow.
Yes, I am.
As of this year?
Yes, 2025.
So what took you so long then?
I have applied in the past to do some community stuff in the Northeast, but it was unsuccessful, unfortunately. Yeah, a bit more successful this time around.
Right, okay. When I applied for my SSI fellowship, that was quite some time ago, we had to prepare some videos. I think you have to do that now as well. I think this is the only way of doing it, isn't it?
Yes, you have to make a video explaining what your plans are.
It's a bit of a challenge to do that, to prepare, I don't know what it's, 6 minutes or 4 minutes that you have to do.
Around that.
Around that. So how did you go about that?
I was mainly sort of thinking, what can I do? What can I say that will inspire people to get on board with my plans? I'm, say, trying to support better mental health in the community, and I was trying to think, what can I practically do to support that? I had quite a good sort of slogan, which was that I think if we want to make research software more sustainable, we have to help sustaining the people writing the software as well, which was all well and good, but then that raises the question of, what can we actually do? I don't want to be the guy who comes in and says, hey, you look stressed. Have you tried yoga? Because that doesn't go down very well usually.
No.
But I don't want to just sort of give out advice from my own life, because what works for me won't necessarily work for other people. So it's working out how we can sort of bring together stuff, tips and advice and stories to help continue the conversation around mental health as much as anything, but also see what we can practically do to support it. So yeah, I had some sort of vague ideas for what I can do. I've got a lot of experience with mental health sort of myself. And so I'm sort of sharing my story to help continue the conversation and break down the stigma a little bit. And then, trying to see what else we can do to inspire other people to do the same and to collect information and resources together.
You preempted my question, which was, what are you going to do with your SSI fellowship and what it is about? But we now know it's about mental health. So what is it that we can do in practical terms?
I think one of the most important things we can do is to talk about it more and be more open about it. So that's one of the things I'm doing as part of the fellowship. Is I've been to a few different places so far, talking to RSE teams and other groups, telling the story of what happened to me. So I became a father about 2 weeks into the first national lockdown of COVID a few years ago. And over the months, the pressure began to build up, and I ended up sort of burning out and having an anxiety attack and having to take time off work. And although what happened was sort of outside my control or anyone else's, I still think there are things that we can learn from my experience and the experience of others that will hopefully prevent other people from having to go through what I'm going through. So part of it is traveling around, telling my story and talking to people about it. I think the sort of key message is that, if we are more open about it and we can try and be more supportive about it, then we can prevent issues from becoming bigger problems, which is better for the people, as well as potentially saving money from people's absence in the long run. So it's partly telling my story and continuing the conversation, but also I've created a website, which we're calling Converse, which is, again, trying to encourage that conversation. But also pulling together, we've got some tips and advice on sort of self-care, looking after your colleagues, looking after your team, if you're a leader, that sort of thing. We are hoping to include the results of Dave Horsfall's mental health survey from a couple of years ago on that site.
Yeah, I remember that he's also is very active in that space. Are you working together with him then?
Yes, he's my mentor through the SSI Fellowship Programme. And we are collaborating on a few things. We've done a few talks together. So pulling that information together. And then one of the main things that I want to do through the Converse site is to encourage people to submit blog posts, either sort of sharing their story and their experience, which helps people feel seen and hopefully will encourage people to, realize that they're not alone and go out and get support, but also just share tips and advice for weird, quirky things that they do to sort of stay sane during work, during the day-to-day. One of my colleagues is talking about a biscuit tournament that we're currently running at the university, which has been a good sort of, well, not sure if it's been a good team-building exercise or whether it's caused more arguments, but it has at least brought us together and got us talking about things. So, anything that you can do to look after yourself or your colleagues, anything leaders can do to boost morale of individuals or their team, pulling it together from as wide and diverse an audience as possible in order to maximize the impact of that site.
Well, I can see how biscuits can lead to friction. But leaving that aside, it sounds very much like you've already started doing a lot of that before the SSI fellowship. So what is it that you think the SSI fellowship will give you in your endeavors to promote and advocate for better mental health and what we can do about it? How can the SSI fellowship help you in that?
I think there's a few different ways. So I've been planning this for a little while. I had been planning to apply for the previous round of the fellowships, but they did pause the program to help focus on the existing fellows, particularly the ones who were negatively affected by COVID and wanted some extra time to catch up. I think the main thing this does is sort of give me the platform. So through the SSI is helping sort of promote all of the work that I'm doing. I got a chance to talk at the collaborations workshop, submitted a talk to the RSE conference in September, which the SSI is paying for me to attend, which is quite good in the current financial situation. The fellowship also means that I get some time during the day, which my line managers are very supportive of, to work on things like the website. And I'm sort of quite lucky with the way my project work has gone in the last few months that I've had some time to hit the ground running and get started with launching these things. Having a platform and also having the money to be able to go and travel down to Durham or Lancaster or wherever it might be to give the talk and engage with people about this.
Because I think it's also financially supported. I mean, you mentioned the RSE conference, which obviously costs money to register and stay there. But there's also the travel to Doncaster and Lancaster, what you just mentioned. I mean, is that covered there as well?
Yes. So that's enabled me to sort of travel down. Back in the first week of June, I gave 3 talks in 1 week. One was in Lancaster on the Wednesday and then 2 on the Friday morning, one remotely to TU Delft in the Netherlands and one to the Women in HPC workshop at Durham, like a couple of hours later. So being able to sort of physically get down there and talk to people, I think is a benefit, particularly when you're talking about this particular subject.
I would think so. So, I mean, you're doing quite a lot of stuff. I mean, you're doing being a trustee and then you're doing the fellowship. How does this square with your day-to-day work? Because you're obviously an RSE at the University of Newcastle.
Yes, it's been a challenge, sort of balancing these things, but I've been very fortunate that, as I say, Mark Turner and the rest of the RSE team are very supportive of getting involved in these sort of activities. We are given a certain number of hours to work on this. It's also been a struggle being a father because I can't just work on these things in my sort of spare time outside of office hours because I don't have spare time anymore. But now I think we've managed to maintain a good balance between getting the trustee work done for the society, getting fellowship work done, and keeping both of the PIs on the two projects that I'm currently working on happy.
Right. You're not feeling overworked. You're not feeling overly overworked.
No, exactly. It wouldn't be great to burn out when you're trying to encourage people to look after their
not to
mental health.
burn out. Yeah, indeed. Exactly. Are there any practical tips? I know you don't say, well, eat a biscuit or you try yoga and the world will become a better place. But are there any actual practical tips that you can pass on to people?
Yeah, so there's a few things that I've been talking to people about as I've been traveling around. There's been a few common sort of themes, a lot of conversations around dealing with imposter syndrome, for example, which is one of the biggest challenges, I think, for a lot of RSEs. So when it comes to imposter syndrome, the sort of general advice seems to be sort of fake it till you make it, and sort of but I think there are practical things that you can do to recognize that your skills and talents are needed on this research project, even if you don't know anything about the sort of field that they're working in. There's a few practical advice for things there. I've also been involved with a couple of things. So knowing that I was going to be applying for the fellowship last year, I went to the collaborations workshop and mentioned this interest in mental health. And we had an interesting conversation that led to a project called Task Management for Humans as Self-Care, which was about using these sort of task management tools and frameworks to manage your workload. But it wasn't about getting more work out of you for your bosses. It was about managing your day-to-day more effectively so that you could switch off at the end of the day and go home without that nagging little voice in the back of your head saying, oh, you haven't done enough, or you forgot to email such and such, which I think helps with your sort of life-work balance and can improve your mental health. And one of the things that I'm sort of pointing out is if you can improve your team's work-life balance and mental health, then they will be more productive. But I don't think you should go straight to the trying to make them more productive. You can't skip that middle step. And I say there's a few things that work for me. So I use writing a lot to process my mental health. If I've got a particular issue that's been spiraling around in my head for days, I will write about it in a structured way, which helps get it both out of my head and onto the page, but helps me work through it and process it and come to a conclusion. So there's a few things like that. We're hoping that a number of other members of the community will submit similar tips and advice that work for them, and we can collate them and share them via this Converse platform.
So the Converse platform is something that you're going to advertise a little bit more.
Yes.
Once it gets out of the prototype stage. When do you think it gets out of the prototype stage?
It's getting there now. So I've got a design special interest group at Newcastle University RSE team, and we've gone through it and had a look at it and had a sort of hack day on it, trying to improve the accessibility and that sort of thing. So I think it's nearly ready to go. I think we're hoping it will become a resource on the SSI website eventually.
The SSI encourages applications from a wide range of backgrounds, and that means that you don't have to be a software engineer to apply for the fellowship. And on top of that, there are some places available for applicants coming from outside the UK, and this takes me to my next guest, Esther, and for that we have to go to Aruba, virtually of course, an island in the southern Caribbean Sea, off the coast of Venezuela. So let's hear from Esther now.
Yeah, so my name is Esther Plomp. I am indeed one of this year's SSI fellows. When I applied for the SSI fellowship, I was still a data steward at the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands.
Right.
But yeah, and then I took this complicated decision to move positions in the middle of my fellowship. And I moved to Aruba, where I now work for the research center at the University of Aruba. It's quite comparable to being a data steward in the Netherlands, but also there's more space for research projects.
We had this discussion just in the off where Aruba is. I think it's just off the coast of Venezuela.
Yes, indeed.
Can I just ask what made you accept this position? It sounds very exotic, at least to me it does.
Yeah, it was actually not a position. I only got the position after we already made the decision to leave. But my husband actually got a position before me. And then this position also came up. So I was super lucky with how that timeline played out. We decided that we had enough of the Dutch weather and we wanted to have nicer weather. So we decided to take the leave to Aruba. And he has some family ties to Aruba. So this island made the most sense for us.
Anyway, good luck to you in Aruba, and it sounds all very exciting, and I hope the weather works out. So let's talk a little bit about SSI Fellowship. So you're in this year's cohort, this year being 2025. And what made you decide going for the SSI Fellowship?
Why me? Why this non-research software engineering person applying for an SSI fellowship? Yeah, I'm not sure if I would have taken the leap if I had not first applied for the Dutch version of the SSI fellowship, which is the e-Science Center fellowship. I was in the last cohort there, and they were very happy about having supporting roles in these types of fellowship positions, because in the first round it was only open for researchers, and then they opened it up to support people. And at the Delft University of Technology, I held a support position. So I first didn't figure I would fit in, but then they opened up their way. And I'm not that much into coding, so I can do a bit of R. I do some Quarto things because it's very easy. But other than that, I don't do a lot of coding. So sometimes I wonder whether I should apply. But then people are always very encouraging. And that's why I decided to take these types of leaps, which is also, as a support staff, I could not really prioritize these types of projects because there's always someone else's request that you need to deal with first. But then if I have a fellowship or I have a concrete project with outcomes, then I actually have a priority to actually work on that and to make sure that at the end of the fellowship, there's a report with some outputs, etc. And that's also something that management understands better. Both the eScience Fellowship and the SSI Fellowship came also with a budget, which is also more interesting to management because as a support person, there was very limited funding available for international conferences because normally these people do their conferences in the Netherlands or very locally. But I engage with global communities and the work is also relevant to global communities. So it makes more sense to, for example, attend the collaboration workshop, which I attended a couple of times online, but I never got to do that in person because it's always in the UK. And from the Netherlands, that is not that far. But for example, now based on Aruba, that's quite far.
Yes.
At my new position, we also don't have a lot of funding for this. So yeah, that was also a huge push to make sure that I was able to connect with people via traveling, via attending conferences. And for that, the fellowship was a real help.
Yeah, you're right. We seem to focus on research software engineering, but there are other roles, and a number of people have now brought this up. There are other roles as well that are equally important, like data scientist, data wrangler. I think Emma Caroon from the Alan Turing Institute called it once, what we generally put into the bucket of support staff. So you being one of the support staff members, how hard was it for you to carve out your corner in this whole research arena where research software engineering gets some kind of acceptance by now, but I'm not quite sure whether support staff do?
Yeah, I come in this support position from a research position. So I used to do research and I think that helps. A lot of support people or professional staff. So there's also a lot of discussion of which term to use, but I will go with support for this podcast. A lot of them already have like these types of skills or this background in order to be able to fulfill their roles because they need to communicate a lot with researchers or software engineers, etc. So if you don't have that shared language, it will be very complicated to provide support or collaborate on things. I didn't really feel, or at least not in the SSI community, like I was that much of a standout person because they have been prioritizing also other roles. So for example, Emma, but also people such as Malvika. There were a couple of other fellows that are already in these roles. And if you then see that they also already applied for a fellowship, it makes it a bit easier to go like, oh, well, this could also be something for me because they already did it.
Talking about the fellowship itself now, so what was your pitch? I mean, what is it that you try to achieve with the fellowship?
I am a project member of the Turing Way, which is a community and a handbook on reproducible, collaborative, ethical science. And I pitched a project on how do paid or volunteer members differentiate from each other, and how does that play into the community dynamics? Because up until this year, some of the community members were financially supported via the Alan Turing Institute. We currently no longer have that institutional support. But how do these types of support for contributions, how do these affect how the community functions? And there's a couple of studies that have been done for other communities, but not so much on how does it affect the dynamics, more in terms of this is the percentage or this is how many times they contributed, but not necessarily how do people perceive these types of contributors and how does that differ? And do we feel like paid people have more of a say or not? Or do they need to do more of the boring type of tasks because they're getting paid for it? So someone has to do it. And so how does that work out? And so I'm looking at that from the perspective of the Turing Way community, but I think that will be relevant also to other communities.
How do you want to go about it? What aspects of that are you looking at? I mean, how do you measure that?
How do we measure feelings type of question? What I would like to do is first set out a questionnaire to determine what do we actually see as a paid contributor. And then to look more at, so how do we view each other in the community? I think it's easier to do that via interviews, to really dive more deeply into what are people's personal views about this. And that might not be a number that comes out of it. And that part might be less applicable to other communities. But I think the general themes that will arise from that might be relevant to other communities as well. I'm hoping to share all of the findings via a preprint by the end of my fellowship. So hopefully by the end of this year. That might be a little bit optimistic since I haven't even started the questionnaire and the interviews yet. But that's the ideal timeline. And then also to have a section or a chapter or something on the Turing Way itself, because the Turing Way is a handbook for reproducible data science and so forth. So it would be very interesting to do a study on our community and then not also share it via the Turing Way itself. So that's the plan.
My last guest is Niko Sirmpilatze from the University College in London. Niko is working in the fascinating field of neuroinformatics, a field that has undergone a lot of changes in recent years, in particular with advances in machine learning. Changes that haven't really sunk in yet, and that's something that Niko wants to change.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for having me here. My name is Niko Sirmpilatze. I'm a senior research software engineer working at UCL. Specifically, I'm working at an institute which is called the Sainsbury Wellcome Center for Neural Circuits and Behavior, which is affiliated with UCL. And that center has a kind of built-in RSE team, which I'm part of. We call ourselves the Neuroinformatics Unit, as the idea is that we develop open source software tools mainly for the field of neuroscience, but also some adjacent fields. Personally, I work mostly with data sets of animal behavior. These are recordings, video recordings of animals doing different things in experiments or in the wild, and I'm trying to develop tools to analyze that data and to help researchers analyze the data.
Any animals or specific kind of animals?
Any animals. So obviously, like in many research fields, most people work with rodents, so with mice or rats. But there are a lot of projects we collaborate with which use various species, from birds to crabs to anything you can imagine. And we make sure that the tools we develop are general purpose and are not don't have built-in assumptions for any specific body type or animal.
All right. And what kind of data do you collect? I mean, is that audio data, video data, movement data? What does it look like?
The vast majority of the data that at least I work with and I collaborate with people with is video data. So that's videography. That's from one or multiple cameras. The cameras can be on a drone or a conventional camera or a phone, but it's mostly video data.
All right. Okay. How long have you been at UCL?
almost 3 years now.
Right, okay. And have you been research software engineer before, or is this your first research software engineering role?
No, that's my first role, actually. Before I was in Germany, in Göttingen, where I did my PhD. That was kind of in the field of neuroimaging, like brain imaging, fMRI data. And that's kind of, I learned to code on the job of having to do a PhD that had requirements for big data and big data analysis. And then kind of I stayed around for a year or so in the lab in Germany to finish up some projects. And meanwhile, I was looking for jobs, and I found this one, which was a perfect fit for me. So I applied for it.
Yeah, and you're also an SSI fellow, Software Sustainability Institute fellow. And in the cohort of this year, I think your fellowship started this year, didn't it?
Yes.
So what made you actually apply for a fellowship?
I think what was the decisive factor was a colleague of mine, who is Alessandro Felder, who is also an SSI fellow in the same cohort. Alessandro was familiar with SSI for many years, so he was going to the collaborations workshops, and he's basically a big fan of the organization, of the work they do, and the workshops. So he introduced me kind of to the work that SSI has done for promoting RSE careers and adjacent careers in the UK. And I came to understand a bit the ecosystem. And basically, I figured out that my values are aligned with the organization, and I might as well try applying for the fellowship. So basically, it was a colleague that introduced me to this and convinced me to apply.
Yeah, I know Alessandro. Hi, Alessandro, if you're listening. Anyway, was that your first application? Were you basically taken on the first shot, or did you apply before?
No, it was my first application. And I think the surprising fact for me was that the application, unlike other applications people are familiar with, is centered on a video. The thing you have to submit is a short 6-minute video instead of a wall of text, which is kind of refreshing, I find, because it's different to many other things we apply for, but also introduces some unique challenges, like production challenges associated with making that video.
Well, take us through that, because I think that's quite interesting. I had something similar. I had to prepare a video, but I would like to hear from you how you found putting that video together and what it actually is you applied for. I mean, what was the main spiel of your application for the fellowship?
Sure. I will first tell you a bit about how I went about making that video.
Yeah.
So I had a bit of experience because during COVID, like many of us, many conferences were canceled. So they asked for recordings of talks instead of live talks. So I had a bit of experience recording some talks during that time. And I had used various things like Zoom's built-in functionality or open source tool, which is called OBS Studio, which is Open Broadcasting Studio, I think, which is I quite like. And I ended up using OBS to do the recording. So I made a slide deck and then started practicing it and going through it while recording myself. But I think as anyone who has gone through that process will relate, I think it's very painful to watch yourself talk in a video.
And listen to as well. I find listening to myself
and it's tempting to kind of go back and make tiny edits that probably don't make much difference. In the end, I think what helped is that there was a very tight deadline for the application, so I didn't have infinite time to work on this. So basically, I was forced to make a final cut very fast and submit it, which was good in the end, because I'm like many people could get easily obsessed with details, and that was definitely not the point of the application. So, but in general, I enjoyed the process. It was somewhat creative.
Yeah. What is the application all about then? What is your fellowship all about?
I'll try to summarize it. So basically, as I said earlier, I'm in this field of analysis of animal behavior using videos. And this field has experienced a transformation in the last 10 to 15 years, like many other fields, because of AI, because of machine learning. Before, if you wanted to analyze exactly how an animal moves, you would have to use some expensive motion tracking systems, like the things that people use in cinema to make films, like motion capture. But these are very expensive systems, and they're also quite invasive because you would have to place the markers on the animal physically and so on. Yeah. Machine learning kind of has changed that because people now can use computer vision methods to automatically identify the body parts of animals in a video. So you take a video of an animal, you train a neural network by clicking on some points, some training data, and saying, hey, this is a nose, this is a shoulder, this is a mouth. The algorithm learns to recognize those points automatically. It produces basically for every video frame, it gives you the annotation of those body parts you have selected. This is great because it means that within a day or few, you can train a network to recognize these body parts, and then you can analyze hours of days of recordings very fast. And that gives you like this immense data set, which is coordinates of points over time. So this is kind of has been the revolution in the field in the last 10 years, which is very exciting because we are learning new ways to analyze. But the challenge, of course, is that because it's a young field, the software ecosystem, the open software ecosystem around it is not yet very mature. And people that work in this field who are behavioral scientists, social scientists, psychologists, biologists, conservationists, they're not necessarily people who are traditionally trained in like software skills. But with the advent of this data, they kind of now need the software skills. So my fellowship was is planned to organize the workshop for people that could have use of open source software for analyzing animal motion, essentially. And the workshop is planned to happen in London in the middle of August. And we will have about 25 people from around the world who work with this kind of data, who are early career researchers for the most part. And the goal for the workshop is for me and some colleagues to teach them how to use several open source tools for doing this kind of analysis, including tools we develop, but also tools developed by others. And basically, we will spend 2 days teaching them to use the software, to work with real data on real scientific questions. And then we will also do a hackathon at the end where we will teach them how to use Git and contribute to open source projects. That's kind of the idea, to use this workshop as a kickstarting of a community of practice around these open source tools.
Can I just ask quickly, because I find that quite interesting and fascinating, what kind of open source tools do actually exist for this kind of work?
I think you can break down the workflow of this analysis into several steps. The first step is the one I already covered, which is basically taking the videos, annotating them, training a neural network. That part is quite well served by some very popular tools. The most popular one is called DeepLabGAT, and that's kind of well established. And there are many others that do a similar job or take a slightly different approach. Another one called is SLEAP, SLEAP. DeepLabGAT, SLEAP, and others are kind of the main software that do the tracking, the identifying of the body parts in each video frame. What happens afterwards is a bit of a wild west, because what normally happens is that you get this data and every PhD student, every postdoc in their lab writes custom scripts for doing computations like the speed of the animal or the angle of a specific joint or the acceleration of an animal during a specific time period, depending on what they want to analyze. Maybe they want to look at the gait of the animal or eye movement. So what we are doing in our team is we are developing a Python package called Movement, which basically can load data from all sorts of different animal tracking frameworks, including the ones I mentioned earlier, and provides a unified API for dealing with all of that data, and then implements most of the common analysis steps that I mentioned. So most of the things that people would need to work with this data, cleaning the data, computing kinematic variables, and so on. Instead of everyone developing their own kind of script for doing that, which is already happening in my institute, we take everything, we put it in one package, which is well tested, well documented, validated, and so on, so that we can kind of move forward as a field.
Do you think there's anything following up from that? Are you planning another workshop, or is that kind of a test balloon that you're trying to do to see how you do the training in future? What do you plan to do with the workshop after it happened?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because indeed I kind of see this as a first test, proof of concept, and if it works, I have plans on how to build upon it. So the fortunate bit is that Alessandro, who I mentioned earlier, also got a fellowship for organizing a different workshop. But since we are in the same team, we kind of teamed up, and we are putting our events kind of together during the same week to benefit from unified logistics and so on. Basically, we will have a week where each of us will be teaching their material. And then the plan is essentially, if it goes as we hope, to repeat this kind of event once per year. Of course, then we would have to seek alternative funding sources, but we are hopeful that we will find some funding for that. A more longer term vision of mine is to take the materials that we develop for the course and put them online in a format that people can follow in a self-paced way. So if people that cannot come to the workshop or miss it can essentially find the materials online in the form of a handbook and follow them along and be educated about how to use all these open source software tools. This project will take probably several years to properly do, and the workshop that SSI funds is kind of the opening shot.
Three fellows, 3 different backgrounds, 3 different fellowships. There are many different ways in which you can contribute to promote better practices in research software engineering and adjacent fields. Esther, as you've heard, wants to take a look at community relations. Mike highlights the need to look after the people who do all the work, and Niko wants to make sure his colleagues don't miss out of all the important changes that have happened in this field. And later this season, you'll hear more from other fellows about their fellowship work. To make the most of the fellowship, fellows often team up with others, as you've heard from Niko, Mike and Esther just now. And, as I said earlier, there are limited places available for people from outside the UK, like Esther. Well, perhaps all of this has whetted your appetite and you wish to apply for a fellowship yourself. I can only encourage that because you may have guessed, I am an SSI fellow myself, and in fact I got my fellowship in 2022. And it's been a great help to build this podcast, which, as you know, is there to spread the word about all the people who write, maintain, and share code in research and science. And I'm very grateful for the continuous support of the SSI. So if you want to join, you're in luck. The SSI is currently recruiting for the 2026 fellowship program, and at the moment this episode comes out, there is still time to submit your application, with the deadline for submissions being the 6th of October 2025. Once submitted, candidates should find out by the 3rd of November if they can take part in the selection day on the 14th of November, and the accepted fellows will be announced on the 11th of December this year. So if you think of applying for the fellowship, please make sure to go to the SSI website where you will find all the details and key dates. You'll find the link in the show notes. Next week, Tuesday, we're going to talk about something very different, the challenges of introducing open source software tools to an area of research that has got a lot of traction in recent years, the area of nuclear fusion. My guest will be Remy Delaporte from the Center of Plasma Science and Fusion at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the US, and I hope to see you all then. Oh, time's up. See you next time. But before I forget, this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons license. See ya.